Good evening, it's Brent with Lykins Motorsports. I am getting ready to start another FE build. We have the 427 medium riser engine done, and we're waiting on the crank grinder to finish the crank for the 289 engine. And we've got pistons ordered for some one of the tunnel port small blocks and machine work ongoing. So the block is almost finished for this build, so we're going to take a look at the rotating assembly and start doing a little bit of preliminary checks to get those out of the way. This is going to be a 496 cubic inch FE based on a BBM cast iron block. We're going to use this steel 4 1/4 stroke scat crank, and along with a set of these K1 600-700 rods, real beefy pieces. The pistons are going to be these custom Race Tech pistons. Real nice looking parts. Got some total seal rings. A 496 is a 4-3-10 bore with a 4 1/4 stroke. So if you remember back to the video from the other evening on how to calculate engine displacement, you could practice your skills on that one and see what you come up with. But we're going to, oh, I forgot about the rest of the engine. So it has one of my custom hydraulic roller cams, and the heads are ported trick flow heads, so they're going to average about 360 CFM, and they make big horsepower. And the intake is a ported Blue Thunder medium riser 2 4-barrel carburetor. The carburetors are finished, and they are here, and multi-million-dollar billet specialties True Track front end dress is here. So we're accumulating parts and getting ready to start on this build. One thing I can do is get all of our rods washed and broken down, and we're going to check some rod bearing clearances with these calico coated bearings. Let's throw them on the floor and see how that does. One of these days I will master doing all this one-handed, but it won't be today. All right. So we did all that to show you this. It's a coated rod bearing, but it was a matter of principle. I had to prove to myself that I could get it out of the box. But we're going to get all that washed and get our pistons washed, rod bearing clearances checked. We're going to weigh our rods, weigh our pistons and pins and rings and all that stuff. Get our rods, pistons hung on the rods, and get a bob weight so that I can drop off the crank and have it balanced, and we can be on our way. So let's get some parts washed. So I have taken the time to measure and weigh all these pistons. First, I'll say that Race Tech's quality has gone up considerably over the years, and make a really good part. But and here's another instance of how good of a part it is. 43069. I'm measuring up to the 10,000th of an inch, and also on a gram scale, 550.4, 550.4. There are some variations in all 8. That's normal, and you'll see that even, you know, if you paid $2,000 for a set of pistons, that's normal. What's also normal is that the entire set of 8 pistons only varied by 2 10,000ths of an inch. So long gone are the days where you have to hone a cylinder, hone a block with each cylinder to fit a piston. That's no longer an issue. And if you have a shop that's asking you to bring the pistons in so they can hone the block, that's probably a leftover from the way that they did things decades ago. So I've also weighed all of our wrist pins and a pair of bearings and locks and piston rings, and went through and weighed all of our rods. You got to use a rod scale fixture to do this. It basically hangs the rod and allows you to weigh one end of it at a time. You will see some variation in the rods as well. Like on the big end here, we're seeing a gram and a tenth. On the little end, about 9/10 of a gram. So once you do all of that, so let me just preface this by saying, if you take your stuff to a balancer that has a good reputation, they will do all this for you. I tend most of the time to weigh all my own stuff and just take a bob weight in with me to when the crankshaft is to be balanced. But you'll see a lot of guys grinding on the rods. You know, like if I wanted to match these two up, you know, I would set this on a kind of like a belt sander or grinder, and, you know, kind of whittle the little end away to bring this down to this one. What I choose to do, it doesn't always work that way, but what I choose to do is I can match components. So I can take, you know, for instance, let's see, this one's 550.4, this one's 549.1. So there's a gram and 3/10 difference there. This pin weighs 143.3, this one weighs 143.6. So there's 3/10 of a gram variation in between wrist pins. So I can match those to bring the little end of the rod into spec with all the other ones. That takes a great deal of time. It's not something that I'll be able to show on video, because it's you would die from sheer boredom, and I almost do that as well. But you just basically go through, weigh each component, and just mix and match until you can come up with a good balance of weights across all 8. Okay, so after a little bit of shuffling around and weighing and measuring, I've got everything laid out the way that I want. Even the big ends of the rods I've got paired up with opposite. So you take a heavy big end and pair it up with a lighter big end to get near an average big end weight. And just everything's balanced out really good. The way that it sits, it's under a gram. So I didn't have to grind on anything, just some careful measuring and weighing and a little bit of logistics. But everything's clean, and I'll clean off my wrist pins where I've written on them. But I've got pistons and rods numbered, so I can go ahead and get those assembled. And then when I go to check my rod bearing clearances, I'll have a number to associate that with. So these are K1 600-700 length rods. I think let me check something real quick. Yeah, the total weight on these rods are just 700 and roughly 46 grams, give or take a few. It's considerably light. So K1 and Molnar make some really high quality, high horsepower, light rods. That'll come out in your favor when you go to balance. In certain situations, it could mean the difference between having to add metal and not add metal. So it's also in your favor to buy, maybe throw in a few bucks more for the better rods, just so that you don't have to pay so much when you go to balance the crank. But 28, I think 28. Hold on. Yep, 28 cc D cup dish on these pistons, and real high quality stuff from Race Tech. Yeah, good parts. Coated bearings, total seal piston rings in a 1.5-1.5 3mm ring pack size. So modern, lightweight, high quality stuff. So I want to go through and wash my wrist pins and get those cleaned up. and I'll start hanging pistons on the rods. Alright, so what I like to do on assembly first is to go through and count everything, especially when you're dealing with, these are wire locks. When you're dealing with spiral locks, most of these pistons take 4 per piston, and save yourself a little bit of grief and count everything out ahead of time, so that if you you don't have to worry about whether you got all 4 in on a piston or whatever. Wire lock's a little bit different because you can kind of take a quick look and see if you got both of them in or not. But I like to just put one side in at a time, and I have a video on how to do this, but you just kind of clock the wire lock, and I have a dedicated screwdriver for that. Rods on a Ford and on a Pontiac, you'll notice there's just a small chamfer to break that edge right here. But on this side, you have a very large chamfer to clear the radius on the crank. So that large chamfer always goes to your right on a Ford or on a Pontiac. So if we lube everything up really good, start our wrist pin in on one side, shove it through, double check that your rod is facing the correct way, and then we put the other wire lock in. That's all there is to it. So number 1's done. I won't bore you with the other 7. We'll get those knocked out. And we have an octet of piston and rod assemblies. Everything well assembled. Next item on the list of things to do is we're going to check our rod bearing clearances. And we're going to get, I use a Toyo mic. We're going to make sure that that is calibrated. Check it every day just to make sure. And then we'll get 1 pair of rod bearings in a rod. And I'm not going to, just over, I guess, experience over the years, check one bearing clearance first before you load all the bearings into all the rods. So if you do one rod, chances are that the others are going to be pretty close to that one if all the machine work is right. But there may be a chance that you'll have to use an X bearing, or maybe a 1 bearing, or a combination of those 3. So it's better to just load 1 rod, check it, see where you are, and then you don't waste your time putting the bearings in all the rods. So let me get my standard. We're going to check our mic, and then we'll get some bearings in one of these rods and check it. Okay, so we got our standard, and I'm good to way past the accuracy of where we will be measuring. So we're good to go there. I'm going to measure the crank journal and get my mic back in my mic stand, and then set up my bore mic. Okay, and sometimes I like to double check myself, so we're coming up with 21992 on that mic, and on this one we are at also 2199. I don't know if the camera's focusing on that, but with a 2. So 2 different mics, 2 different readings, and double check ourselves. Got our rod and cap separated. On a lot of these high performance applications, your rod bearings will be marked with an upper and a lower. The upper goes into the connecting rod side. The lower goes into the cap side. Keep your chamfers the same. You can it's possible to put this stuff on backwards, so you have to be really careful. I use this CMD extreme pressure lube. The rods come with some on it. Oh no, I just blew out the back of my, that is not good at all. Okay, I'm gonna have to put you on pause for a second while I figure this out. All right, I don't know how that'll hold out, but it'll get me through this set of rods. I think I can roll the end of it up and crimp it so that no air gets into it, but we'll do this for now. So get the rod cap on, and we'll get this ready to torque. These K1 rods use an ARP 2000 bolt, and they torque at 30 pound-feet plus 60 degrees. So you have to have a special torque wrench to do that. I'm gonna go ahead and get this torqued up, and then we can see what our first bearing clearance is. Okay, so we got our bore mic set, and we're gonna check our first rod bearing clearance. We are at 1.9. So I generally shoot for about 2.2, 2.3 with a big block Chevrolet rod journal. So that means that I will have to mix and match some of these standard. There's no X or 1 here. So I'm gonna have to mix and match a standard bearing with an X bearing to get me that little extra clearance. Just don't feel comfortable with anything under 2 on these larger journal crankshafts. So I'll get this rod swapped out, rod bearing swapped out, and we'll check it again. All right, so I swapped one bearing half out for an X, and that gives us 2.4. So that's what I'm gonna roll with. Unfortunately, I only have 1 pair of coated X bearings, so I'm gonna have to make a shopping list, and I can do another rod, and then I'm pretty much done. So I guess we're done. I'm gonna take my phone out of my harness here, but yeah, so you know the gist of it, and it's nice to see, you know, the extra clearance bearings are supposed to open things up by 1,000th. So if you mix a standard and an X, you should see about a half a thou clearance difference, which is what we saw. We went from 0019 to 0024. And we're just going to order some more bearings and get those checked. But we made some progress today. Got everything measured and weighed and balanced out here, and we have a good plan of action on our bearing clearances. So hope you have found this video helpful. I appreciate everybody's viewing the videos and the extra subscribers that we've been getting and the comments. So appreciate you all very much. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that so you don't miss out on anything. But I think we're done for the weekend, and hope to have something for you next week to watch. Y'all have a good weekend.